Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Back in video 151, I showed you how to install an NCE PowerCab system here on the modules. Now what I want to do today though is go back and take a look at the Cab06, which is a small handheld auxiliary throttle that you can use with your PowerCab for walk-around operations. And I'll show you some of the features for this that are in the manual, but unfortunately, a lot of folks don't read the manual. So I'm going to go over some of these, and you can decide whether or not you want to give them a tryout on your layout. So let's get started. Well, as I said in the opening, this is the Cab06 produced by NCE for use with all of their DCC systems. And the great thing is you can use it here on the PowerCab based system. You can use it for with a Smart Booster 5 or whatever, and you can use it with one of their PowerPro systems. So it's very useful with a number of different NCE systems. And one thing I like about it, it has this very large control knob that I can use for controlling the speed, because I like that a lot better than the thumb wheel type base system used on their larger throttle. So what I want to do then is go through some of the various features of the throttle itself. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you is a little trick here with the decimal points in the display. Now if you look, there are 4 letters below the display, FR, 1, and 2. Now you'll note right now that the decimal point here, just to the right of the 5, is right over the F. Now if I change the direction, note that it moves to this position to the right of the 7 above the R. So that means that the locomotive is set to go in reverse. Now it's moved here to go forward. Okay, but what about these 1s and 2s? Okay, what they refer to is the shift level. Now, I'll tell you more about shift key in a minute, but if you hit the shift button right here, it's just like hitting the shift key on your keyboard of your computer. It assigns other functions to these values here. So when I hit the shift once, you notice that the decimal point lights up above 1, indicating you're in shift level 1. If I hit it again, it's at position 2, shift level 2. Okay, now you can go for 3 and then back to none. And I'll tell you more about what the shift means when we get to that, but I wanted to show you that on the display. So it gives you an on-screen indication of the direction that the locomotive is going to move when you start to turn your throttle, and it tells you the shift level that you're in. Now let's look at a couple of other little features here. Now normally, you could hit 1 and 2. Now you notice when I hit 1, it only blew a whistle once, and that's what's called a guard's whistle on a UK locomotive. On a US, it would be the bell on the front of the locomotive. But on the 2, it stays on. Now, most functions on decoders are what are called latching, so that when you push a function button, it stays on. However, you don't want to do that with the horn, okay, or the whistle. You want it to be able to play just one shot or allow you to control how long it's on. So if you push here, it's going to just stay on. If you push up here where it says horn or whistle, it's going to be on only as long as you hold the button down. So it's a momentary. Okay, so you can actually play that whistle. So that's the difference. If you want to play the whistle or the horn on a diesel, then you can hit the button that says horn. If you want to leave it on, which I don't think you would, you can hit 2. So that's what those are. All the other functions are I believe, latching. Okay, so it just happens that this particular one, on number 1 here, is not latching because it's only the the guard only blows the whistle once. If it were set up for a bell, it would continue ringing. Okay, now a lot of the features that I'm going to talk about are changed in the cab setup mode. So how do you get into cab setup mode? Okay, the first thing you do is you disconnect it from the system, push the select key, and plug it back in. And you notice that brings you up right here at address 03. Now this is very important because when you're using this with the PowerCab system, you can only be at address 03. Okay? For other systems, there are other settings available. For example, with the Smart Booster systems, the value can be anything from 2 to 5. Now with the larger systems, it can be a value anywhere from 1 to 63. So that just gives you an idea of how to set this up. Now, in a little while, I'll tell you something about this as well. But let's move on now. If I hit enter, it comes up with NOR. Now, NOR refers to the normal or yard operation capabilities of this throttle. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that means as far as operating locomotives here on your railroad. Okay, so what that means is when I turn the knob here on the throttle clockwise, the speed of the locomotive will increase. When I turn it counterclockwise to the left, then the speed is going to slow down and eventually stop when I get to the end of the throw here. And that's normal mode. Now what I can do is if I enter a value of 1, okay, you notice it changed to ARD. Now that means that it's switched to a yard throttle mode. And I'll show you how that works here. Okay, so here I have it set for yard mode now. So I'm going to show you how that works with this locomotive behind me here in the background. And this is a feature that some of you might like and some of you might not like. I can't get used to it myself. So let me go ahead and escape and get out of here. Okay, so now that I've got it set for yard mode, when I turn the throttle clockwise from the 12 o'clock position here on the throttle knob, the locomotive will go forward. But when I bring it back to the 12 o'clock position and go counterclockwise, it will automatically just switch to backwards without hitting the direction button. And that allows you to quickly move back and forth while you're doing switching very easily. So let me show you how that works. Hit that little red subscribe button, and when the little bell comes up, click on it and click all. Thanks now. Okay, so if I start to move clockwise, the locomotive goes forward. And now I just keep turning and it goes backwards. Okay, so I've made those two moves, forward and backwards, without hitting the direction key at all. Now my problem is I haven't trained my fingers to stay off of the direction key, which throws things off, and also I still haven't gotten to the point where I feel comfortable going backwards and forwards. But if you're going to be doing a lot of switching in a yard, this can be a very, very useful way of setting up your throttle. So if you have one of these or you have an NCE throttle of any kind, try looking up in your manual, setting it for yard mode, and give that a try. Okay, let's get back into setup mode again. Okay, now I'm going to go past the yard mode, and we're going to go to BAL. So what does BAL mean? Well, BAL means ballistic. Okay. So what is ballistic? Well, when you turn your throttle, the speed of the locomotive will increase as you turn the knob. That's normal. Now, if you increase that to, say, a value of 7, then it is going to speed up faster, okay? So it will be tracking how fast this knob is being turned, and the speed will increase proportionally, okay? So the larger this number for ballistic tracking, the faster it will speed up. Now this is very useful, considering if you're using 128 speed steps, it can take quite a while to go from 0 to 128 with a standard throttle, okay? But if you've got it set on, say, a value of 3 for ballistic tracking, you can turn it very quickly and it will start to speed up quickly. So it allows you to have much more control over the speed of your locomotives. The default value that these come with is a value of 3. And I found that to be a very good setting to use with most locomotives and most types of decoders. But at least you know that's something that you can play with by setting the ballistic value. So I could enter a value of 4 and hit enter, and that's where I would be. Okay, we've moved on to a value of to shifting, SH. Now shift simply determines the shift level, okay? Now you notice we've got a value here on this key. It says shift escape, okay? And shift, it's just like shifting on a keyboard on your computer. When you hit the shift key, it allows these other buttons to assume different functions. And there is a table in the back of the manual on this to show you the different functions of these other keys once you hit the shift button. So take a look at that, because it can be useful to have additional shift keys. And the default is 3, so you could enter shift 3 times to get to some functions. So if you are under normal conditions, if you hit a value of 1, that goes to function 1. If you hit the shift key once and hit 1, that gives you function 11. Hit it twice, that'll give you function 21, and there's nothing for 3 shifts. So that's one use for that. It allows you access to other functions on these keys. Okay, one very important feature that I use on these a lot now is the recall function. You know, you don't see a recall button on here anywhere. So how can you do that? It's hidden in here. You have to know this. You have to get it set up to use it, and then you have to know how to use it. And what the recall feature is, it allows you to have up to 6 locomotive addresses stored in memory here that you can rotate through. So you could be operating 6 different locomotives, not simultaneously, but you could be doing one, and then you could hit the recall button and move to the next one, and so on, so that you can control up to 6 locomotives using one throttle by simply rotating through them. So let me show you how we enter those values, or how we set it for different recall levels, and then we'll go ahead and I'll show you how to enter them and how to access them. To turn the recall feature on, or to set the recall feature, you hit the shift key 3 times in sequence, 2 and 3, and then the direction key. Now, at that point, it says RCL, which is short for recall. Now let's say I want to set it for 3. So now it should be set for 3 locomotives to be retained in the recall. So right now I'm at 5786. If I hit shift direction, you notice I've got 0, same all the way through here, because I haven't entered any other locomotives into that buffer. But what I can do is select a locomotive. Let's say select 5775, hit enter to make it active, and then shift direction, okay? Now we're at 0 because we've entered that one. Now let's enter 6412, like that, and shift direction. We're at 0. Now let's add 6424, and hit enter, shift direction. Okay, now let's go ahead and see what we've got. Okay, we're at 5775, 6412, 6424, and 0. Let's enter 5786. Shift enter. Okay. Now, if I go through, we now have all 4 locomotives in here. So now I can operate 5775, 6412, 6424, and then finally we're back at the one that's active. And that's all there is to it. Now, how do you clear this out? Well, you can obviously cycle through here, entering 0 into all of those addresses, or you can just go back and reset the cab to the factory settings. But that's going to wipe out all your other settings that you might have changed along the way. So those are the only two methods that I could find in the manual on how to reset the buffer or the memory stack to zeros or to clear it out. Finally, I want to show you how to set the cab back to the factory default settings. So for that, I've disconnected it. I'm going to press the select button and plug it back in, and it's going to come up with an address of 03. Now, if you enter a value of 00 and hit that enter button, that will automatically set the cab back to the default settings. So I'm entering those and hitting enter, and that should take us all the way back. So at this point, if I go back in, you'll see, hit select, we're at address 03, which is the default address. Normal operations, ballistic tracking at 3, 3 shift values. The firmware was 1.1, and then we're back at the locomotive we're controlling. So that's basically all there is to that. You know, go ahead, read through your manual. There are some nice features in there, and it's a very short manual. And let me point out one thing before I close. Right here on the back, there's a little cheat sheet for all of these, number of these features that I just covered, particularly the shift level functions. Okay, so take a look at that on the back, and now it might have a little bit more meaning for you.